Good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Ogden. I'm an editor with LaRouchePack.com, and thank you for joining us for our Friday night live webcast on the eve of the presidential elections. Obviously, we're here 4 days before the November 6th elections, and what Mr. LaRouche will say tonight will be highly significant for that reason and for others. Now, we're coming off of a very successful appearance that Mr. LaRouche gave at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., earlier this afternoon, along with Jeffrey Steinberg of EIR, which had a major presence of international press from countries around the world, China, from Spain, from the Middle East, from Georgia, from Africa, and elsewhere. And obviously, what Mr. LaRouche said there earlier today will get very extensive coverage around the world. Mr. LaRouche's keynote from that event is already available on the LaRouche Pack website, and you can expect Jeffrey Steinberg's opening remarks and also the question and answer session to be available by later this evening. So we encourage you to watch that as soon as you conclude this event tonight. But what Mr. LaRouche has to say right now, we will follow the usual format of our Friday night webcasts here. Mr. LaRouche will have some opening remarks, which I know he has prepared, and then that will be followed by some questions and answers from in the studio here. So without any further ado, I'm proud to introduce to you Mr. Lyndon LaRouche.
Well, thank you. I should begin by saying, as I said earlier today, that you don't know anything about what is about to occur in the United States now until later. In other words, the election will be finished, and then you will begin to find out what the real action is. And it is not the election, it's something much more profound and much more extensive. First of all, we're dealing mainly when dealing with Obama, we're dealing with the Benghazi incidents which have occurred. First of all, his launching of an illegal war under the U.S. Constitution. It was an illegal campaign that he ran. And it also is mass murderous campaign, which was the theme set in motion about the original war that Obama ran. And it is also the precedent for what will follow since then and has followed since then. So we're on the verge of events which are beyond the understanding of most people in the United States, including some leading people who have no comprehension of what's about to happen during the middle of this week onward. And that's the thing to be emphasized. Now, first of all, is to recognize that we're immediately in a situation where we're headed toward the threat of global thermonuclear warfare. And by that I mean the approach very soon, as probably after the election attempt, which will not be conclusive in itself. But we're headed toward a thermonuclear warfare. And if it occurs, it'll be global. It will probably be started. In effect, the actual global war be started by the United States. It will be the Ohio-class submarines and similar kinds of capabilities delivering thermonuclear capabilities, weaponry, which are not possessed by really any other nation generally. And so that's where we stand. That's the key thing. The second thing to consider is in this series is the fact that Obama is continuing the policies of Adolf Hitler in terms of health care. And the T4 healthcare program by Adolf Hitler, which was the beginning of the genocide under the Hitler regime, is the exact precedent on which Obama is operating today. And therefore, the danger is, if this, as I emphasized earlier today, that if this war is launched, it will be an extermination warfare, because the United States will probably start it. There are already wars going on, warfare that has been caused by Obama already. But when the crucial point is the point that the present kind of wars, which are going on under the Obama administration particularly, and the British monarchy, and the Saudi families, that this warfare will suddenly reach a point where it's no longer a limited warfare of the type we know in process now, but it will become thermonuclear warfare. And probably, if this will take about less than an hour and a half of thermonuclear bombardment on all sides concerned. And that will leave the United States and the planet as a whole in a desperate situation from which mankind may not recover. And that's the point. Now, the typical case of this, as I said, in dealing with Obama, you're dealing with a Hitler-type mentality. Precisely. His healthcare policies, the so-called T4 healthcare policies, were the origin of this policy. The same policy has been in process from Britain under the relevant British figures, Tony Blair. Tony Blair is the precedent in Hitler's policy in terms of health care for the United Kingdom. It's a T4 policy all over. What Obama has introduced step by step since his inauguration, especially since the spring of that year, April of that year, what he's been pushing for is a similar T4 program, which has been in operation inside the United States against U.S. citizens, though it's not reached its full maximum yet, by any means. So that's what we did. That's one thing. We have to understand also that this warfare is absolutely crazy, absolutely insane. The human species probably could not outlive an hour and a half of that kind of exchange of warfare, launched first by the United States, but under the direction of the British monarchy. The Queen is the mother of this evil. You know? And let's be clean. I think she dropped her pantaloons or something from space over a stadium in Britain, and it was considered some kind of a cheerful event for some people's taste, not mine in particular. And the other part of the problem, which we have to deal with, which is slower and deeper, but is the so-called green policy. Now, this is contrary to all physical, biological, economic principles, that any species which does not increase its effectiveness within the range of species to rise in energy flux density is a doomed species. And if the United States were to continue with the so-called program of environmentalism, which is the Queen's policy, which is she herself has emphatically defined her policy as one of genocide, with the immediate target to reduce the human population of the planet from the present level estimated at 7 billion people to 1 or less. And under those conditions, with those kinds of policies, the human species could not survive other conditions in which we exist now. So therefore, the Queen has to be pushed to one side, and so forth. Now, the major problem that we have to deal with, apart from those with which people are generally familiar, more or less familiar, is that we have a problem of asteroids and things of a similar nature which are already threatening mankind on Earth. We have not had an extinction event of human species within what we generally know as our lifetime, though there have been conditions on this planet already which take an asteroid hitting Earth has probably caused a mass extinction effect of some species, whatever species were around during that period. We're now in the danger, because the ripeness for this kind of problem is increasing, that if we do not do something in this direction, that is to reverse the policies of Obama on space, because if we do not develop the ability in space to deal with these kinds of satellites that are constantly coming through the Earth orbit, and they're coming through the whole region, from Mars down to Venus, that these orbits are there. And these always represent a threat to very large-scale extinction of the populations of part of the planet, and under certain conditions would lead to a full termination of living processes on this planet. Our mission must be to develop the thermonuclear capabilities and beyond in a higher form, which enable us to reach Mars, not to live there, but to perform missions there, which are necessary. And one of the key principles for that challenges for our Martian exploration is to develop it from Earth through thermonuclear technologies at the least, if not higher order policies, in order to deal with the threat to mankind's existence, which are represented by this stream, a countless stream of asteroids, which are coming through the Earth orbit constantly. And if we do not develop the ability to stop those things and defeat them, divert them, and the diversion of them or defeat of them is a feasible operation. We just need the thermonuclear power to do it. And so these are the kinds of things we face. So we need these kinds of technologies. Mankind's survival as a species has depended on a number of things. First of all, mankind is the only species known to us which is capable of voluntary creativity. All other species, like many of our inferior, say, Wall Street types, do not believe in the creative noetic powers of the human species, but rather think that you can only forecast the past, not the future. The typical person says you can only deduce the future from the same technology which you're living in now. The fact of the matter that only as the human species in particular is able to increase its unique capability in creativity, that mankind has the ability to meet these challenges. And we have to meet these challenges not only for the living species of man, we have to also meet the challenge for the purpose of animal life and so forth as well. And these are the things that have to be done. Now, we are now in the danger here. We face a military policy by the British monarchy, who's the initiator, and who Obama represents fully. He's nothing but a stooge for the British monarchy. For example, he has Tony Blair, the guy who runs the T4 type, Hitler T4 type operation on health care in Britain, notorious. They prescribe a percentile of the population they're going to kill in the hospital system. Murder. This is exactly what Hitler did. There's no difference. The only thing that's lacking is the scale on which Hitler, relative to the total population, did it. But it's the same policy as Adolf Hitler. There is no difference in morality and intention between Adolf Hitler and Obama. And that's the lesson you've got to learn. So he must be removed from office. He's committed the crimes, and whether he's nominally elected or not on Tuesday evening, I doubt it. The probability is that nobody will know who got really elected when for some time to come beyond this coming Tuesday. Because the fraud which we know of, or the capacity for fraud in Ohio and other states, is such that we may not know who actually won. Because the Obama crew does not report the filings of these things in such a way that you can honestly know which are fake and which are real. And the difference is massive. No one really knows what the actual count would be in terms of sort of a close race. You have a jammed up operation, and we never know who is the actual president of the United States. That's the kind of situation we have to deal with. And so that's our situation, that mankind has to realize that this presidency, and many presidencies before, have been failures. For example, Jack Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy, was actually an heir in terms of devotions to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This devotion was prompted in the case of Jack by the widow of President Franklin Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt. Her advice and influence to bring her husband's approach to policy to bear was the basis for the Kennedy administration. This does not mean that Kennedy himself did not have a lot of originality in his work independently, but the principle that he expressed in his work as president was an echo of what Eleanor Roosevelt represented in terms of the memory of her husband. And this is the kind of thing we must go to. Remember that the last time we had net progress in the condition of mankind in this nation of ours it came to an end with the death of John F. Kennedy. We have never had the net increase in conditions of life and so forth on this nation that we had under Jack Kennedy since. We went immediately into a cutback in all kinds of technological progress in general. We went to fight a war which should not have been fought. It was a war by the United States, used by people in Wall Street and elsewhere to destroy the United States. In other words, it was a war to destroy the United States, and you see the end of it by 1948. You see it. That we have a whole generation, a great part of that generation, university graduates or undergraduates and so forth, and they were not really human by the standards of the people who were young people of the same age group. Like, for example, Bill Clinton. President Bill Clinton had been attached, very much inspired by John F. Kennedy. He made a sort of a pilgrimage, shall we say, among others, to meet Kennedy. And then, but the generation that came after Bill Clinton, at the academic level, was poisoned. It was poisoned by the effects that were orchestrated together with this prolongation of war, a totally unnecessary war, a useless war, a criminal war, which did the most to destroy our nation quickly during the period of the late 1940s and in the early 1950s, 70s rather. And so this is the kind of situation. So we must come to the point, and we look throughout the planet. We look at the fact that the continental Europe, all of Europe in general, is disintegrating. All Western Europe is disintegrating. We're going into a hyperinflation in Europe. And if this continues, you will not going to have a recognizable Europe in the near future. And this is what the British Queen, the British policy, the British Empire has represented. And so therefore we have to find solutions. Now the other part of this thing is we are already on the edge of thermonuclear warfare. If Obama continues to be president, you are almost certain that his thrust will be under British direction to reduce the human species to a fraction of its present population. In other words, mass murder on a greater scale than that of Adolf Hitler. And that is what the potential is, which is located in the embodiment of this president. He must be removed from office. And if he's not removed by vote, he should be removed for criminality, because he is a criminal. And that's where we stand today. Now, our problem is this. Take the case of thermonuclear war. I addressed this today on another occasion. If we go into thermonuclear war, there will not be a surviving culture. Probably not even a surviving human population. If you take the mass effect of thermonuclear weapons and similar related weapon systems, which are required to launch and conduct a thermonuclear war, what does it mean? If this occurs, in other words, you've now got a situation, say, in Libya, and the war in Libya, which is orchestrated by the United Nations, or people in the United Nations, and by the British and by Obama. Remember, Obama is the criminal in launching this wave of warfare. Obama has violated the Constitution in launching that war, conducting that war. He's violated all our laws, all our constitutional laws, totally. He's not a sane person. He must be removed from office because he's morally insane. And moral insanity is just as bad as any other form of insanity. Sometimes it's even worse because it's willful. He's a man who does not like anybody. He hates everybody. He likes to kill. He almost giggles in doing evil to people who are his chosen victims. He has killed people literally again and again and again. He's a mass murderer. He's a worse mass murderer than any other mass murderer recently. The famous mass murderer is nothing compared to Obama. He's the super mass murderer. He's the one that goes to Thermonuclear War. And the Queen herself is involved in this. That's her policy. The whole thing, for example, 9/11, as I emphasized today, 9/11 was launched by the British monarchy together with the Saudi monarchy through the medium of the system they put together. And it's all known. But all the stories about this are complete lies. It was the Saudi kingdom which actually played the key point inside the United States under British direction and Saudi direction, especially the BEA direction, which actually organized 9/11 number 1. We just have had an experience with 9/11 number 2, coming from the same sources. This time from the Saudi kingdom, which is stirring up all of this mass killing in Asia, near Asia, in Africa, and so forth. So this is the problem. We must remove what Obama represents as a stooge of the British monarchy, as a stooge of this alliance, this group, which is exactly what's been going on now, this operation. So therefore, we must restore civilization. We must restore progress in science-driven progress. We must extend our reach to space. We must develop further what we've started on in terms of Mars. And the recent development is extremely important in this respect. We can communicate with Mars back and forth at the speed of light. And at the speed of light, with thermonuclear capabilities, we can draw in together the problems of this part of space between Mars and Venus. We can pull that together. We can also, therefore, explore space. This does not mean we're going to colonize space. I don't know how we could live on the moon for extended periods of time. There are many biological problems there to be solved before we can do that. But we can, as we did with recently, by putting an apparatus, properly developed apparatus, to work on Mars, by coordinating the operations between man's mind on Earth and the machines that we put on Mars, connected by the speed of light, with thermonuclear capabilities to affect this operation, we can begin to control this part of the solar system between the Mars orbit and Venus, for example. And mankind, therefore, can undertake missions which will enable mankind to secure human life and to secure its development. And that's where we should be today. We must remove those obstacles, such as Obama, which should fit to be thrown out of office for his criminal behavior. The fraud, for example, of the way he took over a war in Libya, expanded it in violation of the U.S. Constitution. This man should have been thrown out of office already. And we're simply looking for the right group of people who are real patriots, who will throw Obama out of office, and we can get our nation back.